Hi, we'd like to welcome you all to another in the series of webinars designed for GIS at airports. Today we have a very full schedule. I'm Terry Bills, I'm the Transportation Industry Manager here at Esri, and today I'm joined by Randy Murphy from Aurora Engineers and Mike Beavers from Esri, and they'll each introduce themselves. So I would like to point out that we are recording this webinar, and while everyone will be on mute, you will have the opportunity to type in questions, and at the end of the webinar, we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Those that we're not able to answer, we will nevertheless answer them in person. So, all right, with that, again, I'd like to welcome you all. I realize all of you in the airport community, these are incredibly difficult times, and so we want to thank you for making the time. We hope that what you hear today proves valuable, and again, recognizing in these difficult times, I would sort of suggest that you might want to take a look at, we have published an article there in the link. What we would like to suggest is that, given the fact that many of you are not, as your passenger volumes are way down, many of you are probably either working from home or working in reduced office, that in fact there are opportunities to take advantage of the slowdown, and so we would suggest that. I guess the good news really for GIS and airports is really the how ubiquitous GIS has become in airports, not only here in North America, but internationally, increasingly internationally. The last time that I took a look at the top 50 North American airports, 48 of them actually had GIS. And the real activity now is really going down to the small and medium-sized hubs, and really there's been a great uptake among those airports as well, and even really down into the general aviation. We've seen a number of the general aviation airports beginning to adopt GIS as well. So this is really a great time for GIS in airports and in the aviation community. And it is a growing community, and so we do have a LinkedIn group that we would encourage you to join. And in addition, I know that AAAE has also created a geospatial community under their banner as well, and so these are good venues really to exchange information, exchange different comments, and really to create a lively dialogue in the community. So today, as I mentioned, we have a very full agenda. What we wanted to do is really sort of walk you through somewhat why airports are implementing GIS, what the real business drivers, business values are, talk somewhat about implementation patterns, and then we're going to show you a large number of applications that we hope will resonate with you and hopefully stimulate some of your interests. So with that, I'm not going to go on any longer. I'm actually going to turn it over to Randy Murphy. And Randy, if you can take it away. And
thank you very much, Terry. So as Terry mentioned, this is the third in a series of webinars we've been conducting on GIS for airports. We started off talking about how to approach GIS at airports and why it's such a valuable tool for airports and some of the success stories that airports have achieved. And then we talked a lot about the data and where really the data is where the value is. But Implementing GIS software is really where, as I say, the rubber hits the road. It's where the value gets extended to the end users, and that's ultimately what we all want as end users, is we want applications that solve our problems, solutions to our business needs. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And just to pick up on a few things Terry mentioned during his introduction, you know, times are tough right now. Traffic is down, and we're all living in a different world at the moment than we did a year ago. But some of the things we're going to share with you today are some really cost-effective ways to implement software and create some solutions that really can create much more value than the cost of implementing them can be. And so Mike and I will be sharing some of the methods and tools and tricks that we've used to do that. And the other thing Terry mentioned that I think is important too is what we're seeing is that large airports have largely adopted GIS, but that's not to say that they can't take advantage of some new tools to do it more broadly within their organizations or more extensively. And they are facing budget crises. But even as we go into the smaller and medium-sized airports and even general aviation airports, these things that we're going to show you today are methods that airports that have even fewer resources than our larger airports can use to implement this technology and some of the data. So with that in mind, we've prepared a fairly big agenda here today. We've got a lot of topics to cover, so we'll just proceed through. And I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Randy Murphy. I'm the Geospatial Technical Lead with Aurora Engineers. I've been working with airports to help implement GIS for about 25 years now, and the solutions that you'll see today are projects that I've had a hand in.
And I'm Mike Beavers. I'm a solution engineer with Esri and been working in the aviation industry for quite some time. We're in the military and also commercially as a corporate and an airline pilot. So happy to be here and thank you for the time.
So just jumping right into our agenda, first I wanted to start out with just outlining some of the key components of what we call a solution being something that addresses a need that we have. And so the key components in doing that are data. We talked about data, and that was a subject of one of our previous webinars. And it's really important to have good data. You know, an application without good data or no data really is no use to anyone. And so we need to start talking about where the data begins. And we'll talk more about some of the tools that we use here, being ArcMap, ArcPro, or some third-party products that we think are very effective in developing data. And the goal is to create data, convert existing data, maintain data, a continuing challenge many airports have reported having challenges with, and then also rendering that data into the applications in a manner that's useful. But it's not just GIS software. We're really living in a geospatial world, and some of the products from AutoCAD, from Autodesk, being AutoCAD and Revit, are really providing a rich set of data for geospatial applications as well. And the good news is Esri and Autodesk are working so closely together these days to make sure that that data is seamlessly available between these different platforms. But that data needs to reside somewhere, and that's in a database. And there's many forms of databases that can be used, whether they're enterprise geodatabases that are sitting on the platforms such as Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, or Postgres, or a file geodatabase. Either way, databases is where the data is structured, and well-organized data is a key element of the quality of what we're looking for. So it's the structuring of data. It's also the effective storage of data, retrieval, and versioning of data, so that as we maintain it going forward, the data is well understood as to what we're looking at. That data then needs to get out to people, and it's done through servers. The goal of the server is to both publish data, whether it be map services or other forms in effective manners into these applications, or publishing the apps themselves. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about apps, and I found this definition for apps that I thought worked well for this presentation. You know, an app in this case is digital technology, but it's typically small, specialized program, and that's what we're looking for in these apps. We solve one business need. We've seen problems early on when applications or GIS software tools deployed into airports tried to address so many different things, and they became so unwieldy that they weren't effective in the long run. But where an app can be designed to address a specific business need is really where they can be successful. And apps have evolved over the years. And we've seen they start out with just a simple viewer. So we have a bunch of data, we want to zoom, pan, click on things and see certain results. And so that in and of itself has value. But added value comes when we start to design those applications, present the data in a manner that is designed to address a specific airport business process or business requirement. And then in my opinion, where they really become extremely valuable is when the power of GIS gets integrated with other systems, whether it be financial systems or lease management systems, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but that's where we see airports really achieving the most value for GIS investments, is when they can really integrate the applications with their existing business flows and business systems. But then we need data where we work, and we don't always work at a desk. And so extending the capabilities of the software into the field or into other places where we're working is a really important element to that. And some of the things that are moving, what we're seeing coming up and moving forward, are the ability to take us into the data. It's kind of the converse of a mobile app, which takes us to where the data is depicting. This is taking us where we're currently sitting or standing into the data itself and giving us a real sense of what things are looking like in the data, whether it be a 3D rendering in the building or a certain situation outside or underground or what have you. So I wanted to just quickly go through those components, but let's talk about some of the approaches to implementing these types of solutions. There's the off-the-shelf option, which is just take the offering as it stands off the shelf and start using it. And there's certainly some whole plethora of wonderful tools that Esri has available that can be used as is. Just load your data and you can do some wonderful things, and we'll share some examples of that later. But inevitably, we want to configure those applications or those softwares to meet our specific needs or requirements. And so we're looking for ways in which we can customize an application easily without doing programming to meet our business needs. And we'll show some examples of that in just a bit. Sometimes, but this is decreasing, it's necessary to do coding in order to meet specific needs. But I say it's decreasing because the tools that are allowing us to configure software more effectively have really grown quite a bit. But the real trend that we're seeing is pushing software out into the cloud and offering this as a service. In fact, there's a trend to have everything as a service, not only software, but the data is available as a service, and we'll give some examples of that later. The platform itself, such as ArcGIS Online, is available as a service. And so what we're seeing is really geospatial as a service is something that's really a trend right now. And these are some of the reasons, according to a survey that was conducted, as to why organizations in general are becoming so fond and so increasing their usage of cloud technology and cloud applications. And I won't go through all of these, but you can see some commonalities there, including cost, redundancy, availability, et cetera. So let's talk a little bit about some of the opportunities to integrate with other applications that are out there. So there's a lot of computer systems that airports use. We've seen some IT studies at airports that have identified 70, 80, 100 different information systems that are being used. And certainly many of those have the potential to integrate with GIS. But some of the ones that are the most common that we're seeing include work order management. And the goal here is to enable maintenance technicians, maintenance managers, and others to identify problems that they're seeing within their airport, and then identify what needs to happen to those. Typically, the way we see this implemented is by aligning the organization of assets that an airport is maintaining with the features in the GIS. And in order to do that, the GIS folks and the asset management folks and maintenance management and operations folks really need to work in harmony with one another so that they're looking at organizing their assets the same way. And then it becomes fairly easy to integrate them because a one-to-one relationship can be achieved between GIS features and assets. And then using the tools of GIS provide wayfinding to save time for technicians moving out to the field or identify patterns that are occurring with problems that are reoccurring as time goes. Another very popular integration for applications at airports is lease management. And the general sense here is to draw polygons around leasehold boundaries so that people can know how much square footage they're leasing, but also develop lease exhibits effectively and convey that to the tenants, and also work with tenants to find new spaces needed. The real key here, though, is it's requiring good floor plans, and that's the basis for developing a lot of this type of stuff, at least for inside the building leases. But the great benefit of this integration is that it has substantial ability to increase revenue. Some airports have found space that others were squatting on, and now they could charge rent for it. Others have found space they didn't know existed, quite literally. Others have found that they were miscounting their number of square foot in the total building or in certain areas of the building, and that was messing up their rates and charges. And so there's some really important and profound chances to improve revenue with lease management applications. Another one we see a lot is document management. Airports seem to accumulate hundreds of thousands of scanned drawings or documents over the years. And many of them contain valuable information, but finding them, it seems to always be a problem. And so to reference those drawings to a grid or to a project boundary or to a specific location has been really valuable at extracting that information, allowing people to get the information they need to do their job. And the last one I'll talk about today is computer-aided dispatch from a safety perspective. You know, a map and a method of wayfinding for first responders is such an important thing. And having that map be up to date. And that's really a role that we as GIS professionals can play, is to making sure that the dispatch systems have the best maps possible to support those responders. So again, as I mentioned, there's really hundreds of opportunities to integrate GIS for systems at airports, but these are the 4 that we see the most. So what we'd like to do next now is talk about how all these things that we've talked about so far come together, different components of the solution, the different approaches, and the different integration options come together. And we'll give a series of demonstrations here with a variety of applications that have been implemented in a number of airports. The ones we're going to highlight are also focused on some of the more popular ones we're seeing at airports based on a survey that was conducted a year or 2 ago. And not surprisingly, we're seeing the basic map viewer that we talked about earlier as being the most common, because it's the easiest and it's the best way to start getting value very early for the data that's available. But beyond that, airports need airspace, especially in this day and age of new GPS-based navigation capabilities that have created so many new approaches in and out of airports, that to manage that airspace has become a complex burden that many airports have faced, and therefore they're looking for GIS to help with that. Lease and property management for the revenue that we've talked about, utilities and other forms of asset management. And we'll highlight some of these popular applications as we go through the next few slides. So this application is an airspace analysis application. This is at Philadelphia International Airport here. It's in a 3D view. It's a web application and allows users to be able to enter proposed obstacles and specify height, in this case 50 feet. The base elevation, and then the application draws the surfaces, airspace surfaces, and identifies the penetrations of that proposed obstacle, so that you can go through and look at the individual surfaces and how much that obstacle penetrates those surfaces, and also gain an understanding of what might be required to mitigate. Maybe the obstacle can be constructed, it just needs to have lights on top, or maybe it needs to be shortened by a certain amount of feet. So this gives airports a great tool to manage the land use and the development and encroachment that's happening around them of new buildings and new man-made structures around airports. This application also allows existing obstacles that have been identified through survey means and other methods to be displayed on the screen, and then the airport can look at what it may need to do to mitigate those obstacles. And so what we're seeing here is the other end of this runway, and some trees, an area of trees that are at the end there. And we can look at what trees may penetrate the different surfaces and to what degree and how they might need to be mitigated. So this type of tool is really important, not only for the analysis, but also to convey the problem to others. Looking at tabular data, lists of these types of obstacles can be very hard to understand, but you show somebody a 3D map and it very quickly becomes apparent what the problems are and what needs to be done to them. So we'll move on to the next application I'd like to show, which is a property management application. And this one was implemented for Reno Tahoe International Airport. And this is taking basic lease data and putting it on top of a floor plan and showing those polygons, but then finding information about those polygons. So this application was linked to the airport's lease and property management system. And certain information could be pulled out, not only as how the space is being utilized, how much square footage is there, the rent, when the lease is expiring, the tenant, the point of contact at the tenant, and a variety of information, some of which is made available to the lease managers, but then a subset of the information can be made available to others who don't need to know all the details, but do need to know where people are and how to contact them in certain situations. And this is a common thing we're seeing at some of the small and medium-sized airports. It's not only just lease management within the terminal space, but lease management of hangar space, as well as, in this case, storage space that the airport uses for other non-aviation uses. Next application I'd like to highlight is noise mitigation application that was done for Fort Lauderdale International Airport. And this application takes the footprint of noise at the airport and shows which houses were impacted by the extension of their southern runway a few years back. And so they had a new noise footprint, and they were obligated to provide noise mitigation to many of the houses that were in those areas at different levels of priority. And so as they implemented this program over the next few years, they needed a tool to see where the houses were, but also link to a third-party system that had data about the noise patterns at those houses. And then they also wanted to integrate the system with their internal document management system, which in this case was SharePoint, so that all the documents about performing the mitigation activities at these individual residences could be easily retrieved by the people at the airport in charge of noise mitigation. So this is an example of an application that then, has integrated now two different systems. One was a cloud-based system, one was an on-premise document management system. It brought it all in together into the fingertips of the people managing this program. So it's really showing the value that can be provided when the integrations occur. The next application I'd like to highlight is one for satisfying the regulatory requirements airports have of maintaining a signage marking plan. And one of the burdens that airports have had is maintaining the graphics associated with these signs in a manner that's cost effective. We saw a lot of cases where people were hand drawing these signs in CAD or GIS and just taking forever to do it, and then not being able to keep up when changes were occurring. And so this was an application that was able to leverage some cloud-based technology, a third-party product that offered a cloud solution, and implemented an ArcGIS web application that then would reach out to that third party to render these signs the way you see them on the screen right here. So Mike, you want to take us through the next few applications?
That sounds good. Yeah, just a brief pause to let you know that what you're going to be seeing now is a solution that includes several apps that are intended to meet regulatory requirements that the FAA has for airports to do airfield inspections. And if your airport doesn't have that requirement, it's also a good tool that just gives you the ability to then monitor inspections and operations in real time. So let's start out the demo now by looking at a dashboard, which gives you the ability as a airport manager and operations manager to see the condition of inspections and any issues. You could filter those things, whether they've been rectified or not, any of these issues that have been observed across the airport in real time. So as an airport manager, I'd use this dashboard to be able to see individual details about issues or inspections. You could even see all your airport assets. So you could easily click on those and then see information about specific assets or issues that were observed. It also includes high resolution imagery from a business partner called NearMap. So you can include vertical and oblique and then textured mesh 3D data directly into your dashboard in your viewer. So as a mobile tool, an inspector uses this tablet and this app to go out and then conduct airfield inspections like I'm doing here. So I'm just filling out drop downs, which are related to Part 139 FAR's, Federal Aviation Regulations, about information I'm going to observe when I do my inspections in the field. So once I have selected, say, an issue about a runway, I noticed during my inspection that I see some runway end lights were broken. So I could use my GPS and then locate where that issue occurs and then take a picture of that. Also, going beyond that, look at the details and then submit that information in a form which becomes part of the database. It looks like, Randy, maybe the video is stopped. Are you still hearing me? Okay, there we go. Good. So when I select other issues, I could even create NOTAMs and generate NOTAMs using the tool itself. I can use my GPS and then locate specifically where that issue is located across the field as well. And then by regulation, I'm required to then select all the other issues or the areas that I've observed during my inspection. So it just makes the whole process much more seamless and quick. So I can see the issue that I've submitted, and then that issue becomes part of a database that you can see in the dashboard or in the viewer, which gives the inspector the ability to then see this information in real time. Also, if there's an issue that requires me to rectify it, I can use this app to then identify any of the issues. In this case, it was at Broken Light, and then I could create a workforce assignment and then assign that work to an individual who goes out onto the field and then performs that assignment, like you can see here. So created that assignment, and now a mobile worker is going to be able to go out and then fix that issue, resolve that issue. And using this mobile device, then I'm the mobile worker. I go out into the field and then I can begin my work and then repair those issues. In this case, the broken lights. I fix them here. Using my mobile device, then I can make note of that and then fill out a form, which allows me then to audit, for audit purposes, be able to track the work that I've done here. So you can see all my assignments in my dashboard. And then if I have to go out and then do a re-inspection, I use this app to simply go out and then select the asset or the issue and then update its status with the date and time. And then quickly go in and then annotate that that issue's been resolved, which again becomes part of a permanent database for auditing, so you can track this. This same thing can be used for wildlife inspections and really internal inspections of any assets on the field or otherwise. Okay, Randy, let's go to the next slide. All right, so during coronavirus response and recovery, the airports are going to be required to do deep cleaning of the terminals. You're probably already doing some of that now, and as part of the CDC requirements, the CDC requires you to go out and do cleaning. And again, here's a dashboard that you can use to track that cleaning of your terminal. So you can see these different cleaning areas throughout the terminal in this dashboard, and I can look at the status of those. So I can zoom in on the map and then see the status, whether that's yellow, the cleaning's in progress, or that they've been cleaned. Notice as I zoom in too, you'll see very high resolution or high detail drawing files of the terminal itself. I can go in then and then filter and see which areas have been cleaned today or yesterday or any of those that have been last week. And again, I can configure these filters so that they show any date and time. And then look at each individual zone. So as that terminal manager, I'd like to see which zones have been cleaned. Gives me the ability to do that. And then restrooms require special and continuous attention. So this tool allows you to see individual restrooms and the status of when they were cleaned and by who. Also shows you the total number of restrooms that have been cleaned and those that are in the progress of being cleaned, and then those that have already been inspected as well. So this dashboard gives you the ability to then segregate out the status of the cleaning within each of the terminals, and then see the detailed list on the left-hand side of those areas that have been cleaned and by who and when, by zone as well. So I can select an individual cleaning area and then see pop-up information about it. Those are highlighted on the dashboard. So now I'm shifting gears and I'm going to be a supervisor monitoring the cleaning operations inside this terminal. I'm not asking the cleaners to do anything different. I'm just supervising their cleaning operations using a tablet, and I'm going and walking across the terminal, and as cleaners are doing their job, I'm just making note on the app of the date and time in the cleaning area and the status. So this area was cleaned by me and it's being inspected now. And after that inspection's done, then I simply update that status. I could take a picture of that area that's been cleaned and then submit it, and it becomes a permanent part of a database, which then you can use for auditing and tracking. So this cleaning solution includes, just like the airfield inspection, a mobile component and also a dashboard. So you can then see those updates that as they show up in real time. And by who. All right, Randy, next slide, please.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike. You know, I think some of the applications we showed, especially that last one, is a great example of how you can take something that's map-based or location-based, but then bring in a bunch of different types of information and then portray it in a really easy-to-use manner with dashboards or other graphs or other tools that we have to really convey the information effectively to the users that need it in the manner that they need to see it. And that's I guess I just wanted to mention that's kind of what we see as a solution. It's not just implementing GIS software, it's putting together GIS and other types of information and bringing it all together in a manner that's designed to really satisfy a particular business need. So, yeah, so good applications. Okay. So next we're going to talk about some of the tools. We wanted to highlight these applications, but what we really wanted to share as part of this webinar is how do you create these applications? How can we achieve these same solutions at all of your airports in a cost-effective manner? Mike?
All right, good. So you may or may not have been accustomed to any of these desktop tools, but one that's really intended to be the core for your GIS as a curator's tool would be ArcGIS Pro. It's a software that's installed on your desktop, and it's used by individuals who want to generate data and curate and share that information and edit and analyze it in 2 and 3D. Okay, next, Randy. One of the other beautiful things is that it gives you the ability to then bring in data from a variety of formats, and then using tools that are part of ArcGIS Pro, you can aggregate your data and get it into a standardized airports GIS format. Next slide. And like Randy said, you can generate 2 and 3D renderings of data, in this case, approach surfaces, and then do analytics with those things so that then others who use an app could then start to consume that data that you created using Pro. Next slide. And then rendering all your data that you have in your airports GIS and others in 2 and in 3D. And Pro also gives you the ability to integrate your CAD and BIM data and read those data models directly inside ArcGIS Pro. Okay, next, Randy.
Actually, Mike, before we move off of ArcGIS Pro, I just want to mention, so earlier in my introduction, I mentioned I've been doing GIS for airports for over 25 years, and I guess one of the downsides of that is that I've gotten pretty ingrained in some of the older tools, if you will, and we haven't talked about ArcMap, which is still, it is older than ArcGIS Pro, but it's still a very valid tool to use. But I'm somebody who's been slow to transition into ArcGIS Pro, but as I've done that over the last year or so, I've really found it to be a very, very powerful tool, and it just is clear that this is the way forward. Not only the 2 and 3D elements you highlighted, Mike, in this presentation, but one of the things that I'm very keen on is its ability to integrate with some of the Autodesk products as well, so we can bring in 3D construction from buildings and designs and to really integrate them with our GIS data as well. So, ArcGIS Pro is such a powerful tool for doing that. The initial data development that we talked about earlier, creating, converting, authoring, and rendering the data as we need it, as you've shown, Mike. So,
yeah, really good point. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So when the data that we have curated and maintained and done analysis on is ready for consumption, the tools that are part of ArcGIS Online allow you to do just that. ArcGIS Online is software as a service and allows you to create and then share data and maps in easy to consume and use mobile applications as well. So ArcGIS Online is secure and shareable. So I could create maps, apps, and data that I would be able to consume just myself, or share those within a group of people or to the entire public. All right, next. Good. So we saw some of that earlier about how we could then create 2 and 3D renderings and then have applications that are intended to be focused specifically on things like obstacle analysis in 2 and 3D as well. Next slide. And then remember, when we talk about solutions that are hosted in ArcGIS Online, it's a suite of tools. So with the airfield inspections and wildlife observations, there are tools like operations dashboards and mobile technology that are linked to one another that then can be delivered as a solution to meet a specific use case like airfield inspections. And when I say always on and scalable, that's important because you don't want interruptions in your GIS. So being able to have complete access to that through the internet and scalable when demand goes up is really important. And that's what ArcGIS Online is intended to do. All right, next slide.
Yeah, that really speaks to some of those reasons why people are moving into the cloud that we highlighted earlier. And ArcGIS Online is really evolving into that easily available, scalable, and inexpensive option for having that whole GIS suite of enterprise capabilities, but at your fingertips in an online solution. And then, increasingly we're finding the abilities that you're going to talk about next in the next few slides to customize the ArcGIS Online experience so that we can deliver what we need to create these solutions that are specific to airport business needs.
Yeah, great point. Yeah. Good. So what we've got really are just a series of tools that we share with other people in the organization and to the public through ArcGIS Online. Okay, next slide. All right, remember, dashboards are becoming widely used and connected to mobile technology. So the workflow that you saw earlier when I did an airfield inspection and when I submitted that data and I'm connected or disconnected to the internet, then that data drives dashboards, which then help decision makers understand the current status of issues and observations that field workers have made across the airport, whether it's outside or inside the terminal. So it's functioning by connecting your mobile workers to decision makers using these tools. So next slide, Randy. Right now, there's been some new tools that have come out that I think are intended to do the jobs that we do quicker and easier. And this is an app that I would encourage everyone to do some research on. It's called Experience Builder. And if you've worked with Web App Builder, this is the next version of that, which really boosts your ability as a creator of these applications to then build very rich interactive 2 and 3D experiences. Next slide. And I used the Experience Builder app to create this interactive mobile tool for a person to go out and then conduct a survey and then interact with the map directly. So it can push information from the map into the survey, which makes the data collection much quicker and more accurate. Okay, next. And remember, with Experience Builder like Web App Builder, you can integrate a multiple variety of apps, 2 and 3D, and gives you the ability to interact with that data. Like you can see here, this 3D viewer that shows COVID-19 cases across the United States, and then I could explore those things by simply interacting with the viewer and then tapping on any of those data points and then getting pop-up information about it. So that's just one use case for the Experience Builder app. Next. Great. So ArcGIS Hub is a way for you to create very rich interactive websites. And it's the warehouse, it's the front face or the location where your solutions and your applications are warehoused and found. Next. And what I'm able to do with Hub would be then to create a series of apps in a gallery, which gives your users real quick access to the information they need. So if I'm on a website, which I built through Hub, and I want to start using that airfield inspection solution, then I'd simply click that icon to the left there, and then it would open up the solution, which could behave just the way you saw me during the demo, show you how I would interact with the solution, both as a supervisor and a field worker. So giving access to your apps through Hub, through a website, makes this much quicker and easier, and really unlocks the ability to then give access to all your users. Okay, next slide. Great, and I've embedded multiple apps into a website directly, so you could interact with that application not by leaving the website at all. So keeping your user experience focused in one URL and one website is really a core component of Hub itself. Okay, next.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we've certainly had some, great uses of some of the tools you just mentioned. We've been using Hub recently to create some really compelling sites for folks to start using GIS. And I think that one of the keys of Hub is it also presents that first entry into it, not as here you are in a GIS, but here you are in, a series of applications that have been designed to meet your needs, and we can change which apps different users see, and also presents them on that first screen as a very customized web page, a web page that might look like the web pages that airports are already using for some of their other business processes or for their external communication. And I think that's so important that, yes?
Yes, it's really, you're right, Randy, to be able to just brand your website so that that user experience is seamless and the look and feel is the same. So that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So just moving on, we wanted to talk about ArcGIS Indoors, relatively new project, about a year and a half, a year or two ago, I suppose. And we're always pleased to become one of the first certified specialty partners in this for ArcGIS Indoors. And we've been implementing it at a couple of airports and finding a lot of value in it for a variety of reasons. One is, indoor applications, whether it be for lease or space management or wayfinding or work order management, are really so important because, statistics show that 80% of our time on the planet as humans is spent indoors. And therefore, a lot of the assets airports have to manage are indoors. And a lot of the customer experience that airports are trying to achieve occurs indoors. And a lot of the COVID concerns that we have to look at recently is occurring indoors. And so for all those reasons and more, having good GIS data for the indoor space of our airports is so important. And so Indoors is a solution set, really, that helps you not only create that data, not only convert data from a CAD platform where floor plans are often maintained or increasingly Revit, into a format that can be ingested into a data model that we talked about earlier, being the database, and there's an Indoors data structure that's been set up already. So converting the data that already exists into this format, and then being able to leverage some of the capabilities to have ArcGIS Indoors automatically generate the paths within our terminal space that people might traverse, and then also to provide the ability to do efficient wayfinding if you're trying to get from point A to point B, and how to do so most efficiently and quickly. And that's only just the beginning, and the capabilities of this platform extend to providing customer service through kiosk applications, through web-based applications for finding who exists in what spaces. And I guess the key here is that all of those types of things were possible many years ago. It just took a lot of effort and a lot of development in order to do that. And with ArcGIS Indoors, we have a turnkey solution set that allows these indoor apps to be deployed much more cost effectively. Another one that I think is really important is utilities. You saw in that bar chart I presented earlier, based on a survey, that utilities data and utility applications are one of the top applications that airports are looking for. And somebody said it to me once very concisely, which was that, this helps them see what they can't see with their eyes, because much of the infrastructure of utilities is underground. And also a complexity we're seeing in some airports, particularly as you go into smaller and medium-sized airports, is that there's many more parties that are responsible, whether it be local utilities, the city, the county, the municipality, or the airport themselves, that are responsible for those those utilities that are on the airport property. And so to bring that data together into a common map, common picture, and then display it with information about what type of utility asset is this, but also who owns it, what's the condition, when was it installed, and other information about it is so important. So again, Esri has come up with a great tool set for this ArcGIS utility network. And it's, again, a data model. Again, tools to help convert data into that data model. But then once the data is into that database structure, is to then make it available to people, not only to create these visuals, such as we're seeing on the slide here, but also have the analysis capabilities to network tracing to determine if there's a leak or a problem with the utility in a certain location, what might be downstream or upstream of it, what valves might need to be turned off, if there's contamination somewhere, where might it have come from. So a great deal of analytic capabilities with this data. And although these two slides, or two graphics in the slide show 2D data, there's also a movement to start showing and depicting data in 3D as well, because it is important as utilities don't just travel through 2D space, they travel through the ground at different elevations or depths below the surface, and it's important to understand that as well. We talked earlier about the importance of bringing GIS out into where we need to work. And what we found is that there's a number of tools that are really helpful in allowing that to happen. ArcGIS Collector is the one that we've perhaps used the most. The graphic on the left was an example of using ArcGIS Collector to collect information on tens of thousands of different signs within a large airport's terminal space, and put those all not only as a point location within the GIS, but capture some basic information about them in photos and bring that all in together. And in this time and age, we're all tight on budgets. We're also seeing ArcGIS Collector and inexpensive tablets being used in the field by a variety of airport staff to collect the information they need in the field. So they feel it's valuable for their job. They can collect it themselves now using ArcGIS Collector. A close companion to Collector is Survey 123, which enables some of the forms, the customized forms we can create to do a variety of things, including the inspections that Mike showed earlier. And so airports have some common needs to create Part 139 inspections of airports and other things, but then the airports might want to customize some of those forms to do their own wildlife surveys or other types of asset inspections that they need to do. And then with all these people running around working out in the field and collecting data and fixing things in the field and doing other things out in the field, the ability to coordinate that workforce into a cohesive unit so that we deploy our human resources where and when they're needed more effectively, but then also they know where their colleagues are and they can report back to a central data source so that the information that's collected in the field can all come together. And so ArcGIS Workforce is a great tool. And so the way we see it is that these three tools, amongst others that Esri has available, are really powerful at creating a solution for the need to use GIS and other applications out in the field outside the desk or office area. I'm going to talk briefly about two third-party solutions that we have begun to integrate into these applications and create a much more valuable experience for the end user. And the first one is NearMap. So NearMap, as Mike mentioned earlier, offers a variety of products. Their 2D orthophotos are very high resolution, very high accuracy, but perhaps more importantly, they have a very high temporal accuracy. And by what I mean by that is that it's collected, depending on the airport, between 1 and 3 times a year for the airports that are covered in the United States, which is a couple hundred. I think it's almost 300 airports in the United States. There's NearMap imagery available for them. And the ability to have that imagery is a subscription. So the airport didn't have to pay or didn't have to contract with a firm to go collect this data. In some cases, airports are relying on city and county information, but that's not collected as frequently as they would like. And here's something for a fairly low subscription price can be achieved and integrated with these applications and made available to users on a frequent basis. And we've done a lot of needs assessments at airports and looking at how airports are using GIS. And one of the things we've found is that the usership of imagery is so high. People love an image because we as humans can interpret things from imagery that the data may not be showing us. And so that imagery paired with data in a GIS application is really, really a powerful tool. And NearMap has also, like many of the applications Mike showed, moved into the 3D realm as well, and they offer 3D images, point cloud data, as well as surface models, the elevation models, and other things that really help us with understanding the world around us. So NearMap is a great source of imagery data that enhances our applications. Another key one is FME. We've worked closely with FME over the years. Some of you know it as FME Desktop. FME Professional. It's also ArcGIS Data Interoperability Engine. It's the same product, just labeled differently and licensed by Esri to sell as part of their product line. But it comes in 3 different flavors: FME Desktop to help us develop and maintain the data and convert the data that we need to use in these applications, but also as FME Server and FME Cloud that can serve that data into the applications in a more effective manner. FME Server has the capability to respond to events that happen in the field and are reported by field technicians, and then immediately transferring that data into a usable format and emailing or alerting or presenting in another web application the data to different end users, maybe it be management or emergency responders or what have you. And then FME Cloud is really FME Server, but existing in the cloud. And we've used that in a variety of applications. The signage application I showed earlier, for instance, uses FME Cloud to turn those dots with certain attribute information into rendered airport signs for those airport signage marking plans. So FME is a great tool that is really sitting behind many of the applications and many of the capabilities that we showed earlier. So we'd be remiss in not touching on operations and support, because if we build these things but don't maintain them, they soon become stale and not used by folks. And so we'll touch on some things that are very basic but so important, especially as we move into this era of using more mobile and online and cloud-based technology. So one is security. Data, it's absolutely goes without saying that we need to make sure that we know the identity of the users that are signing on to these applications. So integrating with the local airport's Active Directory or identity management solution is important. But then making sure then the capabilities in the cloud are delivered to those users in an effective way, and that the data is protected as it's transferred between those environments. But as we've seen, people need GIS capabilities wherever they are, so we want to make it as available as possible. And so whether they're sitting in their office using a network or using the airport's Wi-Fi capabilities, which oftentimes may not cover the entire airfield, or using a cellular network on the internet, we want to make sure that these apps are available. So that's another key thing of providing the support that's necessary here. There's a variety of training options available in this day and age of not being able to do classroom face-to-face training as much as we used to. The number of online offerings has really increased quite a bit. And so there's a great number of free as also paid classes to not only learn how to use some of the applications we've talked about, but how to build them and how to create them and how to maintain them. So there's great offerings there. And then the different levels of user support are really important. Everything ranging from level 0 support, which is enabling or empowering users through different types of media or web resources or other types of material to answer their own questions, all the way to level 4, which is very specialized support to address problems. But making that available to folks so that they don't get encumbered when they start to use these tools and applications. And then I will end on one that I think is so important, which is governance. And in the surveys that we've conducted, one of the things that is presented itself as one of the biggest problems for creating and maintaining these data and solutions at airports and other types of organizations as well is the governance, the maintenance of the data, the understanding what data is changing and when, whose responsibility is it to change the data and update it. And then how does that data get published out to these applications, and then how does it get archived or backed up so that it's redundant and then eventually moved out of the data lifecycle. But that same lifecycle applies to applications. And one of the problems we've seen at some airports is they see the tools, some of which we've presented today and others, and immediately people are empowered to create these applications. And so they do, but they do in different parts of the organization. They do without coordinating with each other. They do without, by making copies of data sets and changing data sets. And they do so in a disparate manner. And what happens over a period of time is that the airport has a variety of applications that don't have a consistent look and feel. They don't have consistent data. There's not clarity as to whether that data is the authoritative source of data or not. And the result of that is it degrades the quality of the applications and the data. And so we're strong advocates of having governance, not to constrain people in the ability and the excitement and the passion to get these applications out, but to do so in a manner that really enhances the user experience and ensures the users that they're getting something that's going to be intuitive, and also that they can be assured that the data is the best available to them at that particular point in time. So governance is a topic that I think is really important. And with that, That concludes our formal presentation, and we'd like to go into question and answer at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Randy, and thanks, Mike. Really a great sort of overview and as well as a whirlwind tour of a number of applications. I will point out this recording, this webinar will be posted actually on our website. It generally takes us about 3 or 4 days, as well as the slides that you saw today will also be made available on our GeoNet website as well. And before we jump into the questions, I do want to point out we actually have an upcoming European Airport Exchange. You can see the link for it there for those of you in Europe, or even for those of you who just have a general interest in sort of the GIS activities of the European airports. I encourage you to join. So again, the number of questions about recordings and the slides, and those will all be made available. So the first question, and maybe for you, Randy, it's what are some of the biggest challenges that you see at airports, that airports face when it comes to getting the most out of the use of GIS?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is getting people to work together, and so stakeholder outreach. What I mean by that is everything from the development of requirements to the implementation of a solution to the publishing of that data, and then getting people to change their previous work habits that didn't have that tool as a capability to start to use it. And that requires, you know, as much as I'd like to think it's build it and people will come, so often I've found that that's really not the case, and that it's the case that people need that support and encouragement and capability to assimilate that new application or tool into their daily workforce. And I think that's the key. And so engaging stakeholders, I would say, is the number one challenge that is important to overcome. Because so oftentimes we exist in stovepipes within organizations. Go ahead, Mike.
And two, Randy, I've also seen that there's been a lot of separate applications and technologies that different business units at airports have owned and maintained through time, and these are disconnected. They're not enterprise-wide. They're sometimes competitive. So having a variety of technology that is probably relic is something that a lot of airports struggle to try and integrate those different tools into their enterprise. So that's been a lot of overhead for them.
Okay, thanks. So next question, and Mike, I'll direct this one to you. There's a question about the ability to integrate radar and ADS-B from FlightAware to really sort of an unusual use case to be able to analyze risky airborne operations.
Yeah, good. Yeah, certainly any feed that you can get as a REST end or a service can be integrated into 2 and 3D viewers. And specifically, FlightAware is a partner that offers up a service that shows airborne and ground-based aircraft and other equipment that have these transponders on them. So yeah, you can do that as well. Pushing those through into your online web apps as a service is the method that's used for that. And there are use cases where you might have aircraft or unauthorized drones flying into or operating throughout airspace that the airports own and manage is a challenge. So yeah, being able to see those things with REST services becomes very intuitive, and taking that data through GeoEvent server and then publishing that information so that then it becomes part of your GIS enterprise. It is possible, and it does happen. So yeah, good question.
And actually being able to then do the analysis to, as the author said, to really identify risky behavior. But next set of questions, and there were several related to this, really around the airspace analysis and the origin of the data that comes in. Is it CAD? Is it LiDAR? Can you maybe talk about, you know, sort of from both FAA and certainly ICAO, I believe, has the same requirements. Randy, you want to speak to allowable data for the airspace analysis?
Yeah, there's certainly a plethora of data available for airspace analysis around airports, and I'll tell you some of the key sets that we use. One, here in the United States, the FAA has a set of requirements through the airport's GIS program about how obstacle data is to be conducted, or collected rather. And so that data produces a very accurate survey of airfield obstructions around the airport as the FAA needs it. And I'm sure there's very similar requirements in Europe and other parts of the world as well. So that's one source of key information. The other thing is that the FAA has taken some steps to make that data available, not only that data, but other data of obstacles available to users. And so now through the FAA Airport Data and Information Portal, is capability to download obstacle data from the airport's authoritative source for that data. So that's another great source. So that's for existing obstacles. The other key element is the terrain itself, and we've used LiDAR and aerophotography and other means to collect elevation data for the terrain, as well as obstacles. Now, LiDAR itself is now allowed, at least by the FAA right now, for the identification of obstacles as a sole means of identification of obstacles, I should say. We found it, however, a very helpful augmentation to help identify, what exactly is that tree canopy and what exactly are different elevations of the building. So if there's the ability to collect LiDAR data along with the photogrammetric data, it really does enhance the data set. And then lastly, I'll mention that there are some third-party data sets available for good terrain models that are important as well.
Okay, thanks. And so unfortunately, we have run out of time. For all of you who have submitted questions that we didn't get a chance to get to, we will actually respond to you directly. And as I mentioned, all of this will be available online on our website. So with that, I'd like to close and thank all of you for joining us today. I hope you found this to be useful, and I hope you will join us for future webinars as well. So thanks, Randy. Thanks, Mike. And thank you all for attending. All right. Bye-bye.